So if we can have everyone silent, we're gonna get started. The floor is yours.
So we can start now? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Victoria Tauli Corpus. I am the UN Special Rapporteur on the rights of indigenous peoples, and I'm going to moderate this briefing. On my right is Tarsila Rivera, who is the member of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and she is also heading the president of Chirapac from Peru. She is Quechua. And on my left is Gam Shimray, who is the Secretary General of the Asian Indigenous Peoples Pact. He is a Naga from Northeast India. So we decided that the issues we would like to discuss are to focus on the goals. But before I ask Tarsila and Gam, I would just like to say, for indigenous peoples, it's not an easy job to just deal with all the different goals as separate issues, because we always regard, sustainable development as an integrated whole, which cannot be separated into all these different components. But since we are here addressing the goals, then we have to deal with it. I just want to to have a small anecdote. I was in Kalimantan in Indonesia one time, and there was this elder, and I asked him, how can you describe what well-being is for indigenous peoples? And he said, if the water in the river is clean, for us, that is already the best indicator of us having a well-being and being healthy. And I said, why? He said, because of course we totally depend on the river. This is where we get our water for drinking, for all the things that we need water for. But we also know that the river will never be clean if we don't keep our forests intact, because that is where the water is coming from. And if the water is clean, the animals, our plants, and everything will also be healthy. So he said, so that's the only thing that will tell us that we are living well, if the water in the river is clean. So I think that represents exactly how indigenous peoples look at development. They look at it in a very integral fashion. So for now, I would like to first go to Gam, because Gam is going to say something about the goal 15, which is life on land. So Gam, how do you look at how this goal is being achieved? What do you think are the main constraints, and what best practices can you cite that will show that indigenous peoples are going to achieve this goal on their own, but also in partnership with others?
Yeah, okay, thank you for the question. Just a few quick points there. I think this goal is really critical for indigenous communities, because it is really addressing the issue of environment and biodiversity, So therefore, it is really an enabling goal for many of the other SDG goals, and I think that's why it is so significant. And if you look around the world, 80% of the forest and 60% of the biodiversity is roughly in indigenous territories. That's why these goals really calls for putting the communities at the center, without which this goal cannot be achieved, and that's why it is so crucial. Now the opportunity part is that this goal also relates very strongly with the biodiversity targets of the CBD. That's why it's not something that you're going to start something very new, but already about 10 years is already there under that biodiversity framework of the CBD. So we need to just pick it up from there. And there you have seen that they have an alternative report called the Local Biodiversity Outlook as an alternative report. So if you see there are already many, many community champions there across the globe. And those are the things that we really need to build on and kind of amplify those efforts. I think that is where we can start with, to give an initial round of inputs to the question. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's also some evidence that I've read, in fact, I have written about it recently, which shows that in countries where the rights of indigenous peoples are respected and protected, that's also where there is an overlap with the robustness of the forest, as well as the biodiversity hotspots that we're talking about. So, can you do you think that direct connection is something that is reflected in some parts of the world?
Yes, sure. I think there are many examples now, even in Asia, that are already there, and those ones that are kind of being increasingly recognized. And that's what I say. Some of these are also reflected in that local biodiversity outlook. No, see, for example, now what is happening in Malaysia? They have something called these community protocols, under which all these traditional conservation initiatives are included. And these are really at the landscape level. It's not just about one community, but rivers running into 200, 400 kilometers where communities are conserving. And that kind of resolute initiative that communities are taking is increasingly being recognized. And some of these community protocols, now the native courts, that's a state-recognized court in Sabah, Malaysia, is being now recognized by the judges to be used as a regulatory framework, and also for violation of cases in relation to this. And so there are a number of such achievements being made, and yes, it's corroborated by many other studies like C4 and even rights and resource initiatives, that really indigenous conserved areas are showing many good results where rights are fully recognized and enabling environments are kind of created. So that kind of systemic barriers, of course, is very important to the success of this kind of initiatives, with that kind of increasing recognition by governments. So,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you very much, Gam. Tarsila, the issue of water and sanitation, Goal 7 is something that's very close to your heart. So can you tell us how you look at how this goal is being achieved, and what are the problems also that you see in achieving this goal?
I think it's the principal challenge globally and in our countries is to try to make advocacy with our governors or decision-making peoples. No, why? Because we are talking in the public arena about water only sometimes for drink or to have water at home. But the water for indigenous peoples means many things. About in our cosmovision or philosophy of life, the water is very important symbol in our spirituality. Why we pray when no rain, the children, we pray at night asking the rain, because the water is very important, no? And the other thing is that we need for drink, for food, for health, but we need to for agriculture, to give life to the land, to produce healthy food, to give the life to animals, the birds. Everybody needs the water. That's why traditionally the river is open. The water is for all of the, how do you say, seres vivos, no? In seres vivos in the community, if the bird need water, with freedom, no? If the bull need water, now, if we see the water only as an economic resource, is very dangerous for us in
But
our
that's the
place.
problem. That's our biggest problem we face now, because there's a lot of initiatives in terms of privatizing water, and of course commodification of water. So what are the indigenous peoples doing to prevent that from happening, because I think the access to water is one of the key issues.
We are trying to talk with decision makers, but the vision of the business and private sector is to be as a resource. And for example, many people of the communities, they said, we don't want to pay for a natural resource that Mother Nature give us historically. Nobody invent the water, came from Mother Nature. That's why it's necessary to see in a holistic way these resources and to give us the participation, because as you know, in highland mountains, if we don't have sufficient water from the river, we take care about the rain, and in a place keep and after we use during the year. And in this case, I think the challenge of the government is to listen and to give participation to local authorities, leaders, and to find a real solution, an efficient solution, taking account the traditional knowledge, our aspirations too, because we don't want to be in the extreme poverty and everybody call us extreme poverty sector. No, because we think it's necessary to be recognized what we give to the country and to the humanity, like you explained about biodiversity, for example, the biodiversity of food and medicine plants.
Yeah, exactly. I think the contributions of indigenous peoples are not very much given attention in the discussions in this achieving SDG goals, but as we can see in many of the work that indigenous peoples are doing in their own communities, you can see that they are the ones contributing significantly. As you mentioned, indigenous peoples are in 22% of the landmass of the world, but 80% of the biodiversity are found in indigenous peoples' territories, which tells us that it's because of the lifestyle, the worldviews, and their philosophy of reciprocity that really has allowed for this to happen. Of course, there's struggles as well to fight against the incursions and invasions into their lands. So can you, I think that we don't have a lot of time, but if you can just cite one very good practice of, say, indigenous peoples on their own or jointly with government, which has ensured that these lands that we are all talking about are really protected and used in the most sustainable ways.
Yeah, in Asia, of course, there are many examples. In Indonesia or in Malaysia, if you talk about the scale, there's a huge areas as well. But one particular kind of a model village, I would say, really inspiring one is in Thailand, where actually some of the points which Tarsila was saying is very well reflected in terms of the philosophy, in terms of the worldview, holistic approach. And that's why it's integrated, right? It's not just the material aspect that we're looking at. And why the practices conservation approach is strong is also because it's internally motivated. There is a lot of spirituality and that kind of connection that makes it happen. So the idea of where we see this strong, in the CBD, we strongly argued in the past about it's not just about ecosystem services, but the precondition is the ecosystem functions. And in that function, there are cultural functions, the spiritual functions, and many other things that we talk about. Also, in this village, if you come, one can really get inspired about how these things really work together. We see this in the form of the cultural revival, traditional knowledge revitalization, and where do they see the inspiration to be? Because spiritual awareness is really seen there as the highest form of us. Spiritual consciousness is seen as the highest form of awareness, no? And without that, they think that these things will not work. And that's why a lot of other much more deeper things are there when we talk about it's not just about do's and don'ts about certain things, right? So there is a village in Thailand which is called the Hua Hin Lat Nai, and many people come to study, and they're really a community champion. There are many, but
Yeah,
okay, we
right,
can
yeah.
go on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that one distinct particularity of indigenous peoples is the way they look at community. You know, community for indigenous peoples is not just the present community, it's the community of the past and the community of the future. And it's also a community in which you have relationships not just amongst yourself, but between you and the living and non-living things, no? So the communities of that's why traditional knowledge and ancestral wisdom is very important, but also the seventh generation principle, which says that any action you take you have to bear in mind what are the consequences of this for the people 7 generations ahead, you know. So that holistic way of regarding a community, which is not just the present community, I think is one of the philosophies and worldviews of indigenous peoples that really ensures the sustainability of the way they manage the resources and relate with each other.
As you know, I am coming from Inca civilization, and they know how to use and to respect the water. This history said that they were very expert on hydraulic.
Exactly.
No, until now we preserve that. That's why, for example, we harvest the water for the year. And in this case, when we talk about SDGs and different SDGs, it's necessary to take account about indigenous peoples, not only in the community. Yes, we need to be respected in the community to develop with our decision how we want to be the persons of the future too. With our heritage of our civilization and cultures. But it's necessary too to take account, for example, when we talk about the cities, where are the indigenous migrants pushed because the poverty or because militarization or invasion of the territory or no more resources? That's why it's not possible to see only one way. It's necessary to open our mind, our view, and I think our heart too, because as human beings we need the same rights for all of us, not only for me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, just to conclude, I think that thank you very much, Gam and Tarsila. I think that when there was a discussion about leaving no one behind last week, it was mentioned that indigenous peoples are among those who are left behind. But in several cases, they are even pushed further behind. And I think the reason why that is so is because their rights as indigenous peoples are not really recognized and protected by many states, no? So I think the appeal from the indigenous peoples is that, number one, the approach to achieving the goal should really come from a human rights perspective, because that's the only way that we will be able to really reach the goals and to ensure that those left behind are being addressed. And secondly, there are many good practices done by people, by women, by indigenous peoples. These good practices should receive the strongest support from the states, and they should not be criminalized, for instance, because they are resisting against a big hydroelectric dam that will destroy their community, or an extractive industry that invades and destroys and pollutes their community. So I think that message that indigenous peoples always want to bring into these discussions is really the human rights approach, human rights-based approach, as well as recognizing those positive contributions, both in terms of governance, in terms of management of natural resources, in terms of diversity, cultural diversity, because these are the elements of what a sustainable community will have. So thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody.